We did it, guys. Welcome to the Monday live stream. It's our weekly opportunity for us all to just gather, collect our thoughts, potentially get canceled. We run the edge of that every single week, and we're glad that you're here for it. We're going to talk about a lot of things tonight. We've got the combine, we've got some helmet comms, we've got a whole bunch of stuff, and most importantly, your questions. To get your question answered, please do us a super chat if you don't mind. Obviously, we'll try to get to every question we can, but the super chat is the best way to ensure that we get your question. We are going to start with the combine. It's all done now. We've finally finished everything up. We've got our numbers in, our results are in. I'd love to know from you boys, what were the biggest surprises from this combine? This is what we call dead air. There we go. Okay.
There was a couple that were faster than I thought. Actually, Xavier Worthy was a little bit faster than I thought. But when he said that he was going to try to run in the 4.2s, these guys at this point, they kind of know what they're going to run because they've been practicing it with like sophisticated timing. So if I think Bijan said he was going to try to run a 4.4 or something. So then you just knew that that's probably what he was going to do. But Byron Murphy's time was pretty amazing. And obviously a 40-yard dash for a lineman isn't like particularly meaningful because they don't run 40 yards ever. But if you see a guy that's around 300 pounds run sub like 4.9, it usually means they're a pretty dominant athlete. Like you look at like the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line, like recently retired Jason Kelsey ran like a 4.8 or something. They have a bunch. Lane Johnson ran like a 4.7. They have a bunch of guys like that, and it obviously translates. And then Jatavian Sanders ran faster than I thought as well. We were talking about that before we went on. I think me and Paul both thought he was going to be slower than he was. He ran a 4.69, which is pretty good straight line speed for a 250 plus pound guy. I figured he would test well like on agility, but I didn't think he was going to show that kind of straight line speed.
Adonai Mitchell caught me by surprise. He ran a 10th faster than I would have thought. I did not see 4.34 coming. I would have guessed 4.45, maybe 4.5 flat, maybe. And his broad jump was 11 feet. That's spectacular. I think his vertical was 39 inches as well. So, you can see the twitch when he's out there running routes, and obviously he's getting behind defenses quite a bit. And I had to slow down for some passes from Ewers this season on more than one occasion. So we knew he was fast and we knew he was athletic, but I didn't think he was just that fast. That's screaming for 6'2", 205. I think they said that the last guy to run that speed at a bigger size than him was DK Metcalf, and that was quite a while ago. And everybody knows DK's a freak.
Paul?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that Adonai Mitchell thing. The fact that he did it 205, he showed up at Texas at about 190. So he put on really good weight. Also the obligatory height change, right?
Yeah. Not 6'4" anymore.
He was billed at 6'5", right? And then he was billed at 6'4", and then of course he gets measured. Remember Roy Williams used to be 6'5", and then he got measured at the combine. He's like 6'2.5". So yeah, that always happens at the combine. But yeah, you gotta measure in your bare feet. You don't get to do your shoes or your socks, or they make you stand in a certain way, and you get a true height measurement. But yeah, a spectacular performance by all the Texas guys. I think so. I wrote an article about it today. Beyond the numbers, every single guy exceeded expectations, and that's a huge credit to them. It's a huge tribute to their parents who gave them the genetics that allowed them to do that. But also, it's a tremendous reflection on the program. So this was the best mark. So the season was the best way to disrupt the anti-Texas narrative, the actual play on the field, right? Won the Big 12, went to the playoff, finished number 3 in the country. Damn good season. The coup de grace was the performance of all these guys at the combine, where they every single one of these guys overperformed. You mentioned Byron Murphy, who deserves every bit of mention, Ian. T'Vondre Sweat ran a 5.2 at 366. That's as impressive as a guy running 4.3, right?
Christian Jones ran 5.05.
That's 502, really
5.02, something like that. Yeah. All right, Christian.
That's blazing. So I mean, for a big man to move like that, I mean, it's very impressive. And so this is basically the end of the Texas doesn't develop, or you're going to go to Texas and waste your career narrative. It all turned in 1 year. And it's a question now of maintaining it and nurturing that. And it's a tremendous thing for the program broadly as just a marketing piece. And more than that, it's not just about the development of the actual guys who are on campus. Obviously, that's happening. It's that we're getting a selection bias of recruits now. Serious-minded recruits who now view Texas as a vehicle to get to the NFL rather than the end goal. And if that makes sense, we all love the guy who wants to be here, right? Well, if the culmination of his life's dream is just getting a scholarship to Texas, we don't actually want him here.
Right.
If we want to win a bunch of games. So this is a tremendous opportunity for selection bias where athletes are going to realize Texas has it all. I'm going to get prepared. I'm going to have a really good time because being the big man on campus in Austin is pretty fun from what I hear. You've got great NIL opportunities. It checks every box and it just destroys the anti-recruiting of Texas. And Eric might be able to speak to this, but one thing that other coaches could all do, whether you're Ohio State recruiter, LSU, OU, whatever, take Texas off the map. Take Texas off the table as an option by negatively recruiting Texas. And if everyone's saying it, then the recruit says, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. And by the way, there was fire as well. Like they weren't just making up this narrative that Texas was underachieving. So what that completely dispels that. And you just can't adopt this sort of, now the player just gets to evaluate fit. And if it's a player near Austin, if it's a player from the state of Texas, you have a natural bias towards the Longhorns for most of these guys. And the fact that their family can see them. Austin's a great place to be, even post-graduation, if you're looking long-term. I mean, it's amazing what one season on and off the field can do to disrupt all of those narratives.
Yeah, what you said was it's more likely they'll get guys that were going to go to the NFL anyways to get them. It's easier to get them on campus now. I think that was a very quick way to put it. But yeah, they always hit a brick wall in the spring recruiting. They'll get off to a good start with recruits within a certain class. Guys just, generally like UT. They like Austin, like all the things that Paul just mentioned. But then they'll hit a wall once NFL draft season rolls around. And they've had years where they go 0 for 2 in the last, 8 years or so. They didn't have a single draft pick go. And then they had a couple with a lot of disappointments that didn't pan out, and guys that were drafted late. Not a lot of early round noise. Early round noise is where everybody that's what gets to the recruits. That and the guys that are going early, they're going to have a number of early guys going. Byron Murphy's early, Xavier Worthy's early, Adonai Mitchell is early. That really gets the recruits' attention. If they're going early, that makes it even harder to negative recruit any holdover developmental questions. So that's. Normally when recruiting hits a brick wall in the late spring, they have to regather and try to win them back over during official visit season. This year, those schools that are going to negative recruit are going to have to pick something else. They're more likely to go to point towards the talent and development by saying that, there's a long path to the playing field now instead of, come play here, you'll play quicker, which is, actually that's not the greatest sell if you sit back and think about it.
Of all the events that we're looking at in these things, we've got the dash, the split, the vertical, broad, 3-cone shuttle, and the bench. Of those, what is the best metric for success? I mean, obviously they're judging very specific things, but if you could only do one, which one would you do?
This is where me and Eric get out in the corners so that Paul can get to the rim.
Well, I've got a little something to say too. So, but I'll let Paul have the fast break.
All right, then let's give Eric the ball. He's fixing to dunk here. What's up?
Yeah, well, there's the one cheat code is the shuttle for offensive linemen. If any offensive lineman that goes 4.47, I think they end up just starting. The amount of guys that do that start like 78% of their career games or something. That's unheard of because, the real metric that they're looking for is like a make or break line. All right, this guy's got a good chance, I believe, is like 4.7 is where they usually find your good starters. But if you find around that 4.47 number, and I know they had a handful this past week because it's a ridiculous class. It's not a guarantee of success, but it's about as good of a guarantee as you're going to have with these measurements.
I'm really glad you said that, Eric. so I didn't watch the draft as much as I typically do, but that's exactly right on the offensive line. And in fact, Notre Dame's Joe Alt, he had a really low number, and he's like 6'6", 320 or something ridiculous. And when I saw that, I was like, well, he's a top 10 pick. Like, that's it.
Yeah, I think they got him at 6'8".
He's 6'8". Okay,
I think so. I think I saw that. I didn't follow as close as normal either. I'm just kind of picking through the threads on IT. If you're not following as closely, you can just read IT and stay caught up. But I think they got him at 6'8".
Imagine a cone drill where your center of gravity is that high and you're able to change direction that quickly in space. That's crazy. I mean,
Johnny Wilson,
he might be a top 5 pick now.
I think Johnny Wilson got a 4.1 or something. And, he's a 6'6" receiver. That's a number that corners get. No, this is the freakiest combine I've ever seen. It's like they measured it all wrong. I don't know, man. It was wild.
Well, it's a progression of, these guys are now preparing for it, right? They're doing 6 to 8 week mini camps, and all they do is prep these drills and prep these tests. So there's a very famous NFL trainer who was one of the guys who trained Brian Cushing, by the way. So he's famous for many things, but he did something really interesting once. He had all these guys doing their NFL draft prep on the 3-cone drill. And he had someone come in, they're all running it, and he was teaching them the proper steps. Because if you take an extra step on that, you're going to lose, 1 or 2/10 of a second, right? So he goes, watch this. And he took the cones and he just changed the pattern of the cones slightly. And then he had everyone run the drill, and all these NFL guys were slipping and falling.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have the steps down yet.
Mm-hmm.
So the point is, this is a test where you know the answers. You get to cheat. The question is, and in a way, that's a test too. Are you going to put in the time to study? And more these guys are professionalizing and saying, I'm not just going to show up and be a freak. That's why the Bo Jacksons of the world, the Deion Sanders of the world, they weren't doing NFL combine prep, right?
Right.
They were hanging out, and they showed up and the day of and stretched for about 9 seconds and then just ran, right?
So what kind of advantage does that give you? Because at the end of the day, like if I know the racing line, I can do my best to stay on that line, but that's not going to guarantee that I finish first. I can know the path.
No. So the ultimate qualifier for all of this, and this is why I'd encourage everyone to read the book, The Sports Gene by David Epstein. It's sort of it's the real world rejoinder to the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours nonsense fiction, which literally Malcolm Gladwell created out of the air, and people still, you got to get your 10,000 hours. Well, you have no idea what you're talking about. So elite genetics trump all of this, and that's what matters. So we're talking about the elite of the elite looking for infinitesimal advantage, and that's it. And that's measured in a half of a tenth of a second here and there, and that can change your draft status. And it probably shouldn't that much, to be honest. You should probably let the film dictate most of your draft status. And I think most of the NFL still does that. But there are speed freaks. If Al Davis was still alive, Xavier Worthy would be a Raider, guaranteed.
Oh, yeah. No doubt.
See that. But that's just how it is. And you did mention what's the most important singular thing. The one thing that's the greatest indicator of your power potential, I can tell you that, is the vertical leap. Because that can't be gamed. It can't be trained. Someone with a 20-inch vertical cannot train their way into a 38-inch vertical. Despite those sneakers with the weird little sole to sell you.
Those, yeah. They were in the back of the magazines. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't work that way. Why? Because the vertical leap is actually your CNS. It's your central nervous system. It's your ability to recruit your muscle fibers quickly. And so that's how someone can be very powerful. It's a measure of power, but not strong, if that makes sense. So Xavier Worthy, I don't think he can squat 335 if you put it on the bar, but he can vertical 41 inches. There's guys at your Gold's Gym who can squat 335 10 times, and their vertical is 18 inches. So the vertical is your innate power potential. It's literally your body's CNS's ability to recruit muscle fibers quickly. And it's not just isolated to your legs. If you have a really good vertical, you're usually really springy and quick and explosive all throughout your body. Now that can vary. You've got the Tommy Hearns of the world, the great boxer. the equivalent of his power potential in his arms and his shoulders was like a 40-inch vertical. But, he probably wasn't a super athletic guy from an NFL standard. But the vertical is a really interesting telltale, and it's really the best insight into your pure genetics, if that makes sense.
Well, sticking with that, let's talk about the people that executed that really well. I mean, based on this combine, and this is from Brett Nelson. I don't want to lose him because he's a primary contributor to our drinking fund, and I thank you, Brett. You're always great on the super chat, and we really appreciate it. But he wants to know, based on this combine, are AD and X locks now first round?
I don't think so. I think Mitchell is. It just takes one team to fall in love with you, and there's a lot of chatter about the Chiefs falling in love with Worthy. I don't know if that's based in reality or not. If I'm the Texans, I'm looking at AD Mitchell at 23. But I came into the week loving AD. I said that he's a first rounder because if he came back for one more year, which he had available to him, he'd be the top wide receiver in next year's draft. They'd be talking about him like the big three this year with Harrison, Neighbors, and Odunze. So if you get him at 23, when the year later he's 8, there's a lot of value there. Worthy, I still, for that 41-inch vertical, I saw people excited about that. How many times did we see him climb the ladder and go get the ball? Not a whole lot. Now, we saw him behind defenses a lot, and we saw him use his acceleration a number of times. But that vertical didn't come into play a lot with the skill set. I question his ball skills, which are a little different than hands. Ball skills are tracking the ball. It's going up and getting them, making a play on it. That's something that's not clearly evident on tape, despite him having the obvious athletic gifts to go do it.
You had a deep breath, a sigh in there, Ian. What are your thoughts?
I don't think they're a lock for the first. I don't think that speeds like that make you a lock for the first round anymore. Like Al Davis, rest in peace, is no longer here to seize guys like that. Tyquan Thornton had pretty good film at Baylor and ran something. I can't remember exactly what he ran, but it was something insane.
Yeah, like a 4.29 or a 4.3 or something like that.
Something like that. And he went in the second round, not the first. And he went to the Patriots and did jack squat.
The Patriots always screw up receiver. So the minute the Patriots drafted him, you knew he was going to fail, right?
Yeah, you're right. So I don't think I do think that, and like Paul's point about how these guys test for the tests very well. They prepare in advance. The NFL teams know this, so they're not going to fawn over these numbers in the same way that us, media people looking for content will. So they know that some of these numbers are a little bit inflated relative to the past, and they are going to put a little more onus on the film.
What a lot of people going into the week, because at the same time they're waiting on all these athletic tests to happen. They're pouring over the tape. They're offering their opinions left and right. The recruitniks, a lot of them were fawning over AD Mitchell's tape, and it's a lot of the stuff that we said even before he ever took a snap at Texas. Is that he's a savvy wide receiver. He sets up cornerbacks really well. He does a lot of little subtle things that aren't going to come up. They're not going to be obvious to the naked eye for most fans. But it surely comes up when you evaluate them. And so he has soft skills that we're talking about. Obviously, he's got ball skills. He uses that 6'2" length, not 6'4" length, to make plays on the ball. And he actually got behind defenses a lot too. So the speed was there. The twitch is there. So I think if you combine that, that's just going to bolster what they saw on tape. Like, okay, this guy is really as athletic as he looks like.
Sorry, go ahead, Ian.
I was just going to say, I agree with Eric. I think Mitchell is more likely to sneak up than Worthy. And like everybody knew Worthy was fast. Like that's very apparent. But Mitchell, to Eric's point, has ball skills and some subtle route running that are obvious on tape. And then the 4.3 just it's just kind of the cherry on the top.
AD's more likely to be a wide receiver 1 in the league, and Worthy's more likely to be a wide receiver 2 in the league. So I think that's just the bottom line. But we'll see.
If you had to say right now, who's the first UT player taken?
That's Byron.
Out the gate?
Yeah, Byron will be the first one. At least that's what all the mockers are saying. And he's got a very high floor, and still plenty of ceiling to explore. When you talk about the athleticism that he displayed, he plays with power, leverage, motor, and he's still only 20 years old. I mean, so even though he doesn't have a lot of room to maximize frame potential like some of these longer guys with 84-inch wingspans, but He's not a complete product yet either.
Hey, I'll say this on the receivers. Production may not necessarily prove the point of who's the better receiver, because so much of your production depends on where you end up in the NFL,
right?
In the offense and your quarterback. The Kansas City Chiefs just won the Super Bowl with a bottom 5 wide receiver core in the NFL.
Don't remind me.
Okay.
Well,
so, and San Francisco has a what? Top 7, top 5 wide receiver core. So a lot of it is your environment. A lot of it is what you have around you.
Yeah.
So Worthy and Mitchell can both be very good receivers, and both could struggle a little bit depending on what environment they land in. What's up, Ian?
I mean, Travis Kelce, if you count him as a receiver, then their receiving core looks a little better. That's
the Niners have Kittle.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the point is the wide receiving room. Who's around you matters a great deal in the NFL, and certainly matters in college. But in college, even an absolute stud can be force-fed the ball and still produce, right? Even with a weak surrounding and supporting cast. In the NFL, it's very difficult. If everyone around you sucks, it's tough for you to just ball out, which makes the Calvin Johnsons of the world and the Larry Fitzgerald of the world
for a long time. Yeah. Right. Andre Johnson was another one.
It's the NFL is much better about their schemes are a little more sophisticated for just erasing a guy with double coverage all day. Whereas in college, that's actually kind of tricky to just use a safety to take somebody out of the game.
Someone in the chat just said, Paul, a lot of that is Pat Mahomes. Yes, that was my point. Yeah, exactly. I wasn't attributing that to their running back room.
We've had a couple rule changes. I want to shift gears a little bit. And you wrote an article about this on InsideTexas.com, Ian. We've got 3 major rule changes coming potentially. I mean, they're being floated. I think they're very likely to be enacted. But the first is obviously going to be, I think the biggest one outside of the 2 minutes and all that other stuff is going to be the comms. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on specifically how that is going to be an advantage for Texas and the coaches.
Yeah, I think Texas is kind of a unique winner in the new helmet comms rule, which for anybody listening that doesn't know what we're talking about, in the NFL and in 2024 in college, the helmets have radios in them, or at least like a helmet on each side of the ball has a radio on it. And then the coach can just speak into his headset the play as it's written in the playbook to his quarterback or his middle linebacker to then communicate to the rest of the team. So in college, what you see, since they haven't been allowed to do that in college. So instead you have this elaborate system where either the coach sends in a player with the play call if the team huddles, or if it's a team that wants to go fast and get up and line up as quickly as possible, they have all those funny boards on the sideline where you'll see pop culture references and weird symbols, and they all indicate different terms from the playbook to the players. Sometimes maybe the players look at their wristbands to tell them what that means. And then that's how they receive the play call. Obviously, as we found out with the whole Michigan scandal, that was ripe for cheating. It's actually not cheating to steal signs, but there are ways you can do it that are cheating, as Michigan demonstrated. And it just adds all this amazing complexity and espionage to the game of college football, which is sort of funny and amusing to read about, but I don't think it really adds to the game. And so they finally, after the Michigan scandal, they're like, look, it's ridiculous that we don't just allow them to use radios in the helmet. The catch for Texas and a lot of teams is that Texas has a pretty deliberate pace to their offense a lot of times. So for them to have Sark just radio in the play call to Quinn and then Quinn communicate it to the team is fine. And then no one can steal their sign, right? Because they don't have a sign. But if you're a team that wants to go breakneck tempo, line up in like 10 seconds and have the play and be trying to run the ball or run the new play. The helmet communication isn't really, you still need the sideline signals to get the play into all the different players. So we're probably not going to see the sideline signal system completely evaporate from college football. You either need to go really fast to make sure that the other team is up against it, trying to steal your signal and get a response in, or you want to be a team that is a little more methodical, like Texas, or like Kalen DeBoer now over in Alabama.
Let's moving over to some specific players here. What are we hearing on Bledsoe? We had him at 14 on that list. I'd love to hear any insight that you may be able to provide for that, Eric.
Yeah, that list was not based on the. Yeah, I don't think that the team didn't vote him 14th best player on the list.
I don't think. Yeah, I understand. I didn't phrase that.
Oh
properly.
Man, no, yeah. So I don't know how that was presented on the site here. That might have been the day that the beanie was cutting off the circulation to your head. I'm not sure.
It's possible.
No, so that was a list based on talking to sources, just kind of aggregated a couple conversations and came up with that. But I mean, there's not much else to say this time of year other than Dre Bledsoe looks like the real deal. Like he's ready to take the next step. He's weighing more. 290-ish might be low. I actually heard 300. I just, I haven't verified that. I haven't seen him in a while, so I'm not going to say it's 300. So I went with 290 to be safe. He can play. People still want him to get bigger than that. I saw a comment on our YouTube channel last week that he should get even bigger. With it, without as much pop as he plays with out of his stance and as much physicality as he plays with, 290 is good. You don't want him to really lose any athleticism. He's still got another year of college after this to get him right. Hopefully he stays around another year. The way we're hearing about it, it could be one of those breakouts like Byron, and he could be gone. He does have that athleticism. He's actually more athletic than Byron. So I think we're hearing all the right things we want to about Dre. The next step will be what do we hear about in practice once the pads come on?
We've had a couple questions about Sark specifically, and in this transition that he's in right now is kind of establishing himself kind of as, in some ways, the next, I don't want to go as far as to Saban, but obviously he's coming from that tree and how he approaches the game. And this one is from the board. And the question really is what facets do you think need the most tending to right now? Is it scouting, recruiting, schemes, installing them, staff management, game planning, anything? Like, he's doing so many things so well. Are there any areas that you're seeing or hearing about that might be a blind spot for him or need a little bit more tweaking?
Yeah, questions like that are always difficult because I feel like it's over my pay grade. I don't know enough about it. I'm not behind the scenes to that degree. Nobody in the building thinks that he's failing in any regard, as far as game planning, stuff like that. Obviously, in two of their biggest games, they got outplayed. They got outplayed by OU. They got outplayed by Washington. In both games, Texas deserved both those losses, whereas, a number of times we've seen in the past where Texas was clearly the better team throughout. And even in some of the games they lost at the end. We saw that, especially in this first year, saw it again a couple times in the second year. This year was the games they lost, they just deserved to lose. They didn't play well, too many mental mistakes. So there has to be something in the preparation that he's hopefully pointing to or looking forward to address. But as for me sitting behind a little desk in Lake Conroe, Texas, I'm not going to sit there and call out a $10 million head coach. I think he's done a fantastic job. And I do think he's probably still learning certain aspects about it. What that is, that's probably for him to articulate if he ever feels like doing it. For me, I don't feel like I have the chops to really critique from my vantage point on that stuff.
And this is a question mainly for the group here, sticking with the team over necessarily Sark specifically, but what are some of the metrics to success next year? I mean, you put in there, obviously Quinn winning the Heisman, you probably had a successful year, but we've got to replace some starters. Where do you see, what are some things that you're going to see and you're going to feel like, okay, we've really secured some potential fail points for us?
I'm looking at how they, the defensive identity, they have to regroup their identity because they lost the two defensive tackles, which provided their identity. I'm not saying they're going to be weak at D tackle, but they're not going to, certainly they won't be as strong. You're not going to build around those guys in the same way that maybe you can build around them, but it's still not going to be the same way that you did this past season. So defensive identity is a big one, but really this team should just put everybody, even when the defense doesn't play well, the offense has enough weapons. They should be putting up a lot more points on the board than what we saw this year, where, when they're inching into the 30s and maybe pushing up against 40, they should be clearing 40 a lot with the offensive firepower they have next year.
Yeah,
I
think this offense
Paul.
needs. Thanks. I think this. Thank you, Ian.
It just works better when I do all the talking, guys.
Yeah, that's fine. I think this offense needs to put up a lot of points, as Eric said, often and early, because that really will benefit the nature of this defense. So the beauty of Murphy and Sweat is that they could play any style. If it was a powerful physical run team, they could get dirty. They could hold the point of attack, and it would take 4 offensive linemen to block our 2. And even then, they weren't getting it done. And then you're winning a numbers game on defense, right? Also, they could break the pocket. They could create pressures. They could create penetration. They could do anything they want. I'm not convinced that the DT room this year, although very talented, is capable of holding up in sort of a slugfest kind of game where it's dirty between the tackles, endless pounding. Not a lot of that played in college football anymore. But our opener is going to look a lot like that. The meaningful opener against Michigan. So I think that's important that this offense stake these guys to a lead, because I think this defense with a lead and the ability to let it go and pass rush is going to look very different from last year in terms of the number and the waves of pass rushers that Texas can throw at you. And I think if you fall behind Texas early, I think it's only going to get worse for you.
I have an article coming out tomorrow morning that makes much the same point that Eric just made, that the identity is going to have to be pretty different, because the defensive tackles, like Paul was just saying, while talented, are very, very different from Murphy and Sweat. And so the defensive strategy has to look different as well. I think to maximize a different team, they really need Quinn to grow in the drop back passing game. Like, they could probably be much better in the run game next year, but they could hit a totally different level that would be very meaningful for playoff games if Quinn could get closer to like the Colt McCoy 2008 standard, where you could call, 30 progression passing plays in a game and trust him to get back there and just dice people up. He has not been there yet thus far. Obviously, he's been very effective in what they have done. But if he could get there, I mean, it's just a cheat code in college football. It's virtually indefensible when you have a quarterback that can play at that level. And then the secondary, they have a tremendous amount of talent now accumulated because they have so many good young guys that are back. They added Makuba, and they were able to retain Barron. So they can figure out how to maximize their secondary and get the right kind of technical growth from those guys, then you're looking at something much closer to the kind of secondaries Texas has had when they've really been, national championship or on the brink.
Yeah. What's the worst case scenario they put back there? You got Muhammad at one corner, Barron and Brooks, and then you got worst case they would go Makuba and Taff. That's not an easy secondary to pass on. I know there's a lot of recency bias. Everybody just saw Texas get carved up by Roma Dunze. There's no shame in that. Closest thing to Larry Fitzgerald in quite some time. Roma Dunze killed the damn combine. There's no shame in Brooks taking some of those losses. So I think the secondary, I think it's every year there's a couple concerns that we beat to death, and then the season comes around, you're like, maybe that wasn't such a big deal anyways.
Eric, I think the concern is not talent in a vacuum. I think the concern is coordination on the back end.
Yeah, I mean that could be a fair complaint going back to the hiring process. So we've talked about that on Inside Texas as far as Kwiatkowski not having a guy in the back end that's married to the fronts. And that's what happens when you hire your defensive back coaches before your coordinator. So they do have to come over that. They're still looking for help in the secondary as far as replacing William Gay, who replaced Dwayne Aquina, who replaced Gary Patterson from a year prior. We'll see if they can get some help, or if those coaches can grow, or what. That's another one of those I get asked about a lot. I don't have enough detail to really speak intellectually on it, but that I do know from talking to people from that Peterson tree, the Kwiatkowski tree, that you've got to have that defensive back coach that ties in properly to the front, like you had with Jimmy Lake famously at Washington.
I mean,
Hey,
sticking
let
with
me ask
that,
you a
this what
question.
Victor wants to know. Is this a contract year for those? I mean, obviously this is not our place to say it, but I mean, they've had the sample size now. Do we feel like this could be a contract year for Joseph and Gideon?
I don't know. Sark's been. I don't know how bad do they perform or underachieve. That's. I can't say. It's too early for that. Do I think Sark would make a change if he needed to? He's made a couple changes where he needed to. Both 2 times with wide receiver coach. One was, maybe he would have come back, maybe not. Andre Coleman was not coming back, so I think he'll make a change when he needs to. He seems to be pretty proactive. He seems to go above and beyond to win. The guys. What's their whole saying this offseason is what obsessed. So I think. I think everybody's coaching for their jobs to some degree, but obviously, I think that Gideon and Joseph know that they have to do better than what they did in a couple of losses this year.
Going back to the comms just really quickly, because this is a little bit of a technical question. Who are there coaches outside of the head coach that are able to talk to the players? Presumably the coordinators would be the ones.
Connor Stallions, I think, is going to have access.
Oh, that's nice. Is it just he can dial in? It's a satellite situation. He can sit at home, call in plays to other teams.
Russian hacking.
Ham radio operator in Des Moines, Iowa, is going to take
totally.
over.
I mean, it's in a shack with a homemade antenna. I'm sorry for anybody that's listening that's built one of those antennas. It's very impressive, and I wasn't meaning to make fun. Who else is allowed to communicate with the players?
I actually don't know the specific rule, but just reasoning through it, I don't think they're going to require that the head coach or a single person make all the incoming transmissions. So maybe they have. I don't know. I actually don't know.
What's the limit of the? So I haven't read anything about this. I missed your article over the weekend. I think it was the weekend. I was on the move a lot. Can't they still do the old way? And the coach can actually, while the play's being called in, the coach can actually be in the ear saying, "Hey, why aren't you noticing this? Why aren't you reading this high to low and tell them where to go with the ball?"
Yes.
Right.
They get up till either 15. The snap of the ball or 15 seconds left in the play clock, and then it turns off.
Yeah, so that's going to be another advantage that's a big advantage for Texas.
Yeah, Coach Williams was with UNLV during the trial period of this during the bowl season, and they had multiple players that could listen at the same time. I think they had up to 4 per side. Now, obviously, that's going to change with this particular rule, but it's one of those things that we talked about a little bit on the board. Ian, is presumably you're going to have several defensive players that are going to have the capability to listen to those things, and they're going to be turned off depending on it. Because you could have, for example, Ant Hill and Taff on the field at the same time, and I would assume that one of those two would certainly have the speaker in their ear.
Yeah, they're only allowed to have one at a time right now, as the rule's written, as I understand it, and it needs to be somebody.
Taff would call it into the defensive coaches, and then they'd call it back into Ant Hill based on the legend of Taff.
So, hey,
it has to be somebody
on defense. Actually, you know this. So, defense, they're going to still use signals for at least the D line, probably most college teams, because you don't have the ability to coordinate from linebacker or safety to get you basically got 3 personnel groups, right? D line, linebacker, safety. Your linebacker can help get the D line lined up, but the basic call that's going to probably still come from the sideline will probably be signals. And frankly, it's not, if someone cracks it, it's not the biggest thing in the world, right? The secondary, you're going to have the guy with the mic. The hot mic is going to be your mic linebacker or your smartest linebacker, or it's going to be your safety. So that's how it's going to work. And
that's another benefit. You got a young middle linebacker. A young middle linebacker. I didn't mean to cut you off.
It doesn't have to be the position. I mean, it's your smartest linebacker.
Well, I'm saying that's a benefit because presumably Anthony Hill is going to be the middle linebacker, and it's his first year taking over for Jalen Ford. Maybe it goes to Benda. I don't know, but if it is Hill, that'll help him out.
The trick though is, if you communicate it all to one guy, he needs to be someone that understands the whole defense well enough not to flub the call, right? He needs to know what all the different terms for all the different positions mean, so that he doesn't
Not really.
Well, he at least needs to be able to be consistent with just getting it verbatim.
Yeah.
And if you try to signal in a different deal for your line, you just run into you just run into if you're communicating like just your standard fronts, it's fine. But if it looks different for a blitz and then somebody can steal your signals and know every time you're going to blitz, that's not so great. I mean, that's how it is now and things get by, but
what happens when you rotate? What happens when you rotate linebackers, as you know they love to do, that third series, who's going to, I mean, so let's say, can Benda and Hill be on the field at the same time if they both have the microphone?
Yeah, that's all the stuff that has to get ironed out, right?
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Texas has to also figure out the rotations.
Yeah, as people that cover Texas, we have to worry about that with all the rotations.
Yeah, exactly.
I love Victor coming in here with some incredibly inside baseball question. Who do we see our gunners being? I mean, who's going to replace our gunners next season?
Oh man, I'm going Trey Wisner on one, and then maybe Warren Roberson as the other.
What is Taft? Is that where Taft played last year?
No, Taft is usually the up back, and he's the guy making the special teams calls.
Gunners are the guys on the outside, preventing the two release guys from getting to the punt returner.
Yeah, I would say Trey Wisner and Warren Roberson. Those guys play with their hair on fire. Roberson is basically Keaton Crawford again, as far as an athlete and just pure athleticism. He's probably the most athletic DB on the team. That's it, and he's a dog too. We mentioned him last week on the show. So I think that's who I would predict right now. But it could be a number of maybe Kobe Black earns it. DB, that's a good spot for DBs, and they're starting to get a lot more DBs. Maybe Jelani McDonald's even fast enough to do it. I don't know.
Any addition to that, Paul?
Nope, nailed it. That's a great question.
Great. Good job, guys. You guys are doing some really nice work here. I really appreciate it all. For our friends in the chat, we got a few more questions here, or we're gonna make Ian start telling us bedtime stories. Nothing.
Well, you said we split this for beer money. I think we got $1.99 so far, so we better get something potent, man. Acetone.
It's gonna be a Pabst Blue Ribbon.
That's an award-winning beer, Paul. I don't really feel comfortable with you besmirching that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
LC's mom.
Wow. Geronimo.
Well, he's he's 3.0 on the board because he's been banned twice. So
I gotta tell you, I mean, I would respond to this, Geronimo, the way that I would in 8th grade. It's that, I don't have a mom. I don't have a mom. See how sad that is?
Yeah.
Here we
Thanks,
go.
Geronimo.
Elsie's mom is passing out orange slices. Yeah, and it's coming from a Wonder Bread bag that's been turned inside out, because that's what poor folk do in Kansas. I don't need to hear this business from you.
Wow.
All right, Paul, I'm sorry, guys. This is getting really personal. I want to thank you all for checking in with us today. I think everybody's done a great job. I'm really impressed with how Eric has handled his new lighting scheme. Ian has his microphone working, and I don't know what Paul's doing. What's your favorite book back there, Paul?
I haven't read any of them. I just have it.
Have you not?
I don't read at all. I just have that up to be a pseudo intellectual.
Okay. All right. Well, once again, we want to thank everybody.